Are you interested in investing in real estate here in Mexico, but you're afraid that you might get scammed? Well, in this video, I'm actually talking with Monica Loyo, one of our trusted real estate, immigration, and legal partners, who has got over 20 years of experience in helping expats get visas for Mexico, buy real estate in Mexico, and make sure everything is done above board and safely. In this video, we're going to talk specifically about what some of the common scams are in real estate to look out for here in Mexico, as well as how to avoid them and making sure that you really do your due diligence, you cross your T's, you dot your I's, and everything else. If you've been watching our videos for some time and have not yet subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our latest content. And give this video a thumbs up because it really helps us with our mission to reach 1 million expats and aspiring entrepreneur expats. So welcome, Monica. Thank you so much for being here. And one other thing that I'll share with our audience today before we get started is that if they're interested in working with our team, with your team directly, if they're interested in having us help them with their immigration, with their visa process here in Mexico, you can actually go to entrepreneurexpat.com/consult and apply for a free consultation where we will go into your specific questions and help you create an action plan on how to get started. So, Monica, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And yeah, let's start to tell people how to avoid all these traps in Mexico and how to avoid scams, both in timeshare and in other types of investment.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into what some of the most common things that you're seeing in terms of cases that people have brought to you. I know we were talking about this a little bit earlier, where somebody's like, oh, you know what, this happened to me, and these people ran off with my money for this real estate deal, and they said, hey, can you fix it? Like, what are some of the most common things that you're seeing that are like that?
So the most common things where we see scams is in timeshare. Timeshare has a lot of scams, especially after people have bought their timeshare property, which that by itself we were saying is a bit of a scam. But anyway, after people purchase, everyone almost wants to get rid of their timeshare. So then they start getting, I don't know, by some way, they start getting contacts from people that want to buy their time, or at least they tell them they want to buy their timeshares. But that just in the majority of cases, if not all the cases, are just pure scams. So that's where we get most of the scams. There's also scams in terms of, like you were saying, you didn't do your due diligence. You want to buy property outright, not timeshare, and that also sometimes is, can cause conflicts if they didn't check if that property is actually owned by the person that's selling you the property, or if it doesn't have like a double deed or it's been sold to two different people.
So let's break it up a little bit into categories.
Yeah.
So you mentioned timeshares. And when people are reselling timeshares, maybe they don't even know that they want to resell it yet, but they're just kind of done with it for obvious reasons. Like the thing that they said that timeshare was, or fractional ownership, in most cases, I mean, there's some opportunities and everything, right?
Right.
But from a lot of what you've seen, like it was just not aligned with what they thought they were going to get, and they were trying to get rid of it. And then people actually contacted them out of the blue and said, hey, we're interested in buying your timeshare. What happened then?
So the thing is, these scammers that contact the people are really good. I mean, they're really good at what they do, which is scamming people. It's not just an individual person. It's a whole, like almost like a whole crime group, that does these types of scams. And what they do is they tell you, that they know you're selling your timeshare, that they're either they pose as either real estate agents or some sort of group that's buying different properties, or sometimes even as attorneys representing a certain group or whatever, and their credentials seem fine because they'll give you a web page or something, and you go into the web page and it does exist, and you're like, oh yeah, or they're brokers, and it's like, oh yeah, there's a company here and it says whatever brokerage company and this and that. So they're like, okay, they must be legit, which is not the case.
A website doesn't actually mean that they're legit.
Exactly. And so when people fall for this, so my first advice is, if you get a call like this, or someone contacts you just out of the blue, email, phone call, or whatever, just be suspicious and contact an attorney, because right from the start, this is a red flag. And if you go on with the process, it gets more and more complicated, as we're going to discuss. So I would say, the clients that have reached out to us at this stage, it's very easy to avoid it, and we give them all the proper legal advice. If they go on with it saying, oh, okay, this sounds good, and I want to get rid of my timeshare, and they buy into it, then that's where the real problem begins,
So then let's talk a little bit about the process where they're buying into the timeshares. What is the concept, like high level? How would you describe what timeshares are, and
Uh-huh.
also how they're packaged and how they're presented, like, to people? Because that's a very common thing, and especially in countries like Mexico where things are a little bit less regulated. I know that in the US, the majority of timeshares, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call them scams. It's a gray area, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say outright they're all scams, but it's certainly, there's certainly a lot of things in there that don't make them advantageous. And I think here with less regulation,
Right.
it can potentially be even worse.
Even
So
worse.
how are they packaged that you've seen, and what's actually going on under the surface?
So just to backtrack a little bit, of course, resorts are always trying. I mean, most major resorts in Mexico are trying to sell timeshares because they make a lot of profit out
Yeah.
of timeshares. Imagine, instead of selling one unit to one person, you can sell that unit 100 times. Well, of course, that's a better business, right? So people, first of all, the way they try to catch them is right as you get off the plane, you're going to a vacation in Cancun or Los Cabos or whatever, you're a tourist, and you're just here for a vacation, and they, snatch you with, oh, you know what, we can invite you to a free breakfast or whatever, just come listen to our presentation. And that's how they catch people. Here you have 2 tickets or whatever. So once you go there, they'll tell you, okay, yeah, we're just going to give you free breakfast, free drinks. Free drinks is always a catch, free margaritas.
Yeah.
And
Get you a little buzzed,
little
a little
buzz,
loose.
exactly. And once they're, talking to you, they're like, oh, come take a look at our resort and everything. You'll see it. Most of them are beautiful. I'm not going to deny that. And they'll have you there for hours. You just want to get out of it. They're telling you, giving you more and more information. You're having more drinks. And then by the time, because these people are good, so they're going to sell you what they want. Most of the time, they end up selling you what they want to sell you.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, so once you sign, they give you a contract, which you're not even allowed to read really, because they're like, no, just sign here. Sometimes they even take away your passport. I don't know if you realize this. And they're holding on to your passport, and you're like, okay, I want to leave. Give me my passport. Oh yeah, we're almost done, and we'll give you your passport at the end of the
Wow.
presentation.
I've never heard of
Yeah.
that. That's
that happens.
really something.
Really.
Oh my goodness.
And so let's say by the end of the presentation, you're like, okay, sign here. And some people just sign because they're so, they just so want to get out of that. And they're like, okay, they signed. They didn't even know what they signed. Then they give you a contract. Oh, congrats, you got your new timeshare. And once, maybe the day after, you realize, what did I get myself into, right? They got your credit card info and everything. So now it's pretty hard to get out of it. Mexico has just so you know, timeshare, you're not really buying property. You have no entitlement as an owner to that property, or that they told you you're going to be an owner, because sometimes they tell you, no, you're going to be an owner of this, of this thing, but it's not ownership. You just have a couple of weeks a year that you can use. And these are like on a very limited basis, because you have to
give you the blackout days.
Exactly, a lot of blackout dates and stuff.
And when you try to book, and then I've heard also, you can't actually book, less than a certain number of weeks in advance, but then they charge you to book more than a certain number of weeks in advance.
Exactly.
So you basically end up also having to pay extra to book it in an availability, or like an amount of time where the system even allows you to book it at all. You're ending up paying double or triple.
Exactly. And sometimes they also charge you maintenance fees or other type of fees, which were not even in the contract, right? So you end up paying more than if you would pay just a regular stay at a nice hotel or resort, And so it doesn't really give you any advantage. Most people realize this when it's too late, because in Mexico, for timeshare, we do have something called Profeco, which is the Procuraduría Federal del Consumidor, which is basically a consumer agency, which helps consumers from these types of that have been scammed or whatever. And so technically you could place, you could place a queja, I guess, on Profeco, but you only have 3 to 5 days to do it. So by the time the tourist realizes they've signed something, they don't even know this because, of course, they're not going to
tourists.
tell you
Yeah.
this, right? And so they're like, what did I get myself into? Then they wait till they get back home to cancel or contact an attorney or something. Well, then it's too late. Then we can't cancel at all. And all you can do, well, you can cancel. I mean, I'm sorry, but you're just not going to get your money back, right?
Right.
That is what everyone is interested about. So even canceling is a long process with Profeco if it's not within that time period. And um, and so cancellation turns so difficult that most people are like stuck with something they didn't really want. Or
They just keep paying and paying.
Yeah, they didn't
Wow.
even know about it, and now they have this. So most of the clients we have are actually not happy with their timeshare. Most of them are trying to cancel, but it's very difficult to cancel.
Mhm.
You call the resort, and the resort is not going to cancel. They're like, no, no, no. You signed a contract, and the contract is valid for 2 or 3 years. You can't even cancel before that.
Wow.
Okay, that's what they're going to tell you. So if you contact us by then, we can help you cancel, but it's going to be very difficult that we get your money back. Okay,
Mhm.
some cases we've managed to get the money back, but normally it's just cancellation. And you got to lose whatever down payment you put into it. Some people, however, don't contact an attorney and don't cancel it, just go on with their timeshare however they can. And so after maybe several years have passed, miraculously they get a call from someone or an email or whatever saying, we want to buy your timeshare. So at this point, they've been trying to cancel
They're
forever.
desperate. They're
Right?
like they're like
Yeah.
I'm desperate. I mean, wow, just out of the blue, someone. And how do you think these people even got their information? You were sharing a couple of theories
Yeah. Well, that's the
before.
thing. I mean, my
Yeah.
theory is that even these big resorts, and I'm not going to say names because, but even these big resorts are giving out a list to the, or someone, is niche within the resort, and we're not
Mhm.
going to say the whole resort, is giving out a list to these scammers so that they can contact everyone. And they contact them through call centers. They have actual call centers where they're calling all these people. So they're not just calling you, they're calling everybody who has purchased a timeshare.
So there's some public record of it, or it's being sold, or there's some weird way that they acquire that information.
I think they're like selling public records or whatever. Of course, if you call the resort, they're going to tell you, no, we're not doing it. But they are also going to say, we don't advise you to resell your timeshare. Like there's not a market for reselling timeshare.
Yeah, which is another thing that they kind of tend to lie to you
Right.
about when you actually buy the
Exactly.
timeshare or fractional ownership,
Fractional ownership.
as they call it, when they're like, oh yeah, no, you're gonna get the plusvalia, or the value add as it increases over time. And the reality of it is nobody even wants to buy a timeshare in the first place, let alone on the secondhand market.
Exactly.
Because you don't have that sales office, the boiler room there, where you what are you gonna do? Hire the guy to shout at tourists at the Cancun airport? Like,
Exactly. So there's no market for timeshare. So really, you can't sell it. And of course, the resort is not going to buy it back from you because why would they? They can sell, a unit as many times as they want.
It reminds me a little of fractional reserve banking, but
exactly.
we won't get too into
We're
that.
We're not going to get into that, but exactly. So. So at this point, they're desperate. Someone contacts them. It seems like they have the right credentials because they have a web page, because they have everything they're saying. They call them and they answer, of course, because it's the number they put in there. And so if they start to if they take the bite, then they're going to realize that these people are going to tell them, okay, because it's always the same process. Like maybe the company is called different. Sometimes, like I said, they say they're brokers, sometimes they're real estate agents, sometimes they're attorneys, but the process is exactly the same. And so sometimes they say they're trust companies, stuff like that. So they start telling them, look, we're going to offer you this much. And sometimes the amount is a large amount of money. Like it doesn't even make sense that they're offering so much money for a timeshare. Okay.
Guys, when it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're offering this, this large sum of money, and then they start sending you a bank account where they say, look, we have a trust on your name. with this amount of money. And let's say it can be $500,000, $250,000, whatever. It's right there. It's ready for you to take it, but you just need to fill out these forms, which are for SAT. SAT is like our IRS in Mexico, for taxing purposes. And that's it. So you fill out the forms, which are fake, like tax doesn't tax. I mean, SAT doesn't tax on these because they don't even exist. You can't even resell timeshare, let alone, tax it. So you fill out the forms, and they're like, yeah, but there's a cost because you got to pay the taxes, and the taxes sometimes they start off with, well, it's 1,200, 2,200, or whatever number.
Hmm.
So people actually buy into that because
You
it
know
all
what it
seems like
reminds me of? This is like those Nigerian scammers where they say, you know what, you have this inheritance of 5 million
Mhm.
US dollars that came to you from your great uncle Ben.
Right, and then you get a check,
And then,
and
oh, it looks like we overpaid you a little bit, so you're gonna have to send us $15,000 back by Western Union or what do they call it, like Walmart gift
yeah,
cards, and
before
here's
the check
or
clears.
when it clears, but it's not actually cleared, then it gets
Right,
pulled back because it's not a legitimate account.
exactly.
It's
That's that type of
very,
scam.
yeah, and a lot of people fall for it, especially elderly people.
Right, and so they fall for it. They send whatever amount, but then they are requiring more and more. And at that point, some people realize, okay, this might be a scam. I should talk to an attorney. They already send them whatever the amount is, hundred thousand
Thousands, yeah.
dollars.
100,000?
Yeah,
Oh
we've
my
had
goodness.
people send like $250,000 or $500,000. I mean, you don't even believe it.
How much
The
was the
property is not
timeshare
even
worth?
worth that much. I don't understand.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so yeah, but this is true. And so once they realize, okay, I've sent a lot of money over time, and this is probably a scam, well, they contact us, and then they want us to kind of investigate, and we can do that. But we know now as a fact that you can't get that money back. That money is there's everything. This scamming thing is a big organized thing, and you can't get the money back. So now you're looking at, okay, I lost all this money. I'm not going to get it back. You still have your timeshare though, because they don't take that. They're not even interested in the timeshare. But that's and then they start threatening with, okay, you know what, we're gonna send this to litigation, and they start sending letters and all that stuff.
Wow.
And now you realize, okay, then I got to keep paying them because it's litigation, but it's not. They're not even going to go
The
to
scammers
litigation.
or the timeshare people?
The scammers.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
'Cause I
So
know the timeshare people don't like it if you stop paying them either.
no, so you got to continue to pay with
Yeah.
it, your timeshare, because then when you call the timeshare company, they realize it's under your name, and you got to keep paying for that. So so that's going to be
Yeah.
that whole thing.
Okay, what's the main lesson in all that, other than don't buy timeshares to begin with, and definitely don't accept random calls from people who are trying to supposedly buy it and then asking you for money?
Yeah.
Right?
So the main lesson I think is if you already bought a timeshare and you're trying to, sell it, no matter how desperate you are, I think always contact an attorney or someone who specializes in
In
this
the
type of,
country, the
yeah, in
timeshares,
Mexico,
right? Yeah.
because I mean, someone who specializes in this in Mexico, because otherwise you're not going to know what to do, and you're going to fall into this trap and just continue, with that. So
Okay.
yeah.
So what else? What else have you seen? What other types of scams? I know you mentioned there's a lot of issues here with title of properties, like who actually owns a
Yes.
property.
So
Why is that, first of all? Why is that a common problem in Mexico?
well, because I mean, getting a title is actually a very complex process. And I would say, getting a deed to your property is even more of a complex process than it is in the United States. Because as you've seen here, you got to go through a notary public, which is not the same thing as in the States or in Canada or wherever. I mean, a notary public here really has public faith, has to have been an attorney or studied law or whatever. And then it's like public office. And they regulate everything related to land. So any transaction related to land has to go through a notary public.
Mm-hmm.
But there's people that, even though like they issue a deed that says, okay, this person is entitled to the property, but what people take advantage of is they'll just take any property and say, oh, this is my property, I'm going to sell it to you. Well,
Whoa, 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 what do you mean?
so
How
They
would
don't have,
how would someone do that?
because that's like a type of scam. They're not going to be able to go forward with that. But if you fall for it, then they'll take some money from you, you know, because like, let's say I say, okay, yeah, I have this lot, that's my property. And you as a foreigner probably don't know what to check for. You're not going to request a deed. You're not going to request a title search because you don't know. So they just give you a contract, you know, saying the property is theirs and it's these many square meters and blah, blah, blah. And this is the price. And if you fall for it, because I've had clients that this has happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they sign the contract, they request a down payment, you give them a down payment. And as the transaction moves forward, you know, maybe at that point you say, okay, I should request more paperwork, you know. But when you do, there's no more paperwork, or you can't find them anymore, you can't get in touch with them anymore. So that's like a big problem. I wouldn't say this happens in the majority of the cases, but we've seen cases like this. So I think the main thing here would be, if you want to buy property, okay, you first got to get with a real estate agent, you know, that shows you which property is available and all that. Not just someone, you know, your, like we say here, your compadre that says, oh, yeah, look, I have someone who I know that's selling
My
this lot.
cousin's nephew
Exactly.
sells, or
And
whatever, sells real estate in
right.
Guadalajara.
And then
Call him.
No, and even not real estate. They're like, they're selling their land.
Yeah.
And so you're just talking to this random person. You don't even know if it's his land or not. So the first thing would be, okay, that you're actually working with a licensed real estate agent, because real estate agents here are licensed too. And that you're also working with an attorney, because it's not so simple to buy property in Mexico as sometimes it would be in the States, for example. So you got to see, because that would be another type of scam, you know. And then maybe we can go into, you know, what you need to actually buy or invest.
Absolutely. So what are the things that somebody should check, or have their attorney or a notary or someone start to check when they are looking at buying property? Obviously not timeshares. We know that's probably not the, but if they're like, hey, there's this condo right here, there's a house down by the lake over there I'm interested in.
Right.
Fulanito is selling it.
Yeah.
How do I know if Fulanito really owns the property, or if he totally doesn't?
So that's why you need an attorney, I would say, so that they're in touch with a real estate agent. And because sometimes, you know, there's two parties, right? The party that's selling and the party that's buying. The problem with a real estate agent is that sometimes they're representing both. So you might have a conflict of interest there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
big time.
They're going to want to sell at all cost, and they're going to want you to buy that property. So if you're the buyer especially, I would say you need to get an attorney that represents your interest, okay? And that can talk to the real estate agent, and sometimes to the agency that agent is working with, and make sure everything is right. So things we look out for are, for example, before even signing anything, of course you make the offer, and we supervise the terms of the offer, okay? That the offer is within the within the market standards, that it's a reasonable offer and all that kind of stuff. But also, once you make the offer, and again, you know, we request all the paperwork. So you request the deed, and we read through the deed and verify that everything's correct, because deeds in Mexico can be 50 pages, or more, or 20 pages or whatever.
It's not as simple.
It's not as simple, and you got to know what you're looking for within the deed to know that deed, you know, or that person or that company is entitled to sell that property, and that property has been properly registered within the public registry. So that's the other thing we do. We do a search within the public registry of property, and we look. There's another search that we do to look that there are no liens and encumbrances, and that the title is clear. Okay, so those are like the basic things you got to look out for. Once we have that, of course, there's more things, you know, we go through just to see that the property is okay. And then you also work with a notary to see that everything is done properly, that the transaction is done according to Mexican standards, Mexican law, and everything. And if you're buying property within 100 meters of the border or 50 meters of the coastline, then you got to buy either through a trust.
Kilometers?
Kilometers.
Ah, Okay.
That's how everything is in kilometers in Mexico,
Got
right?
it. Yeah.
So
So 100 kilometers of
all the Mexican
the
border with
border,
the
and
U.S.
then it's 50 kilometers from the
Right,
coastline.
from the
And that
coastline.
I think that also includes like cenotes and other
Yeah,
areas.
50 to
Does it include
60.
lakes as well?
It doesn't include lakes.
Okay.
So if you wanted to buy here in Lake Chapala, you wouldn't need, which is where we are,
Yeah.
you wouldn't need a trust. But normally you need either a trust, which we call fideicomiso, and that's with a Mexican bank, or you need to establish a Mexican company.
Mm-hmm.
So we help them in that process also, and we help them. We also work with the bank because that's another party coming into play.
Yep.
So you're working with the real estate agent, the real estate company, the bank, and the notary, basically, and the attorney.
That's a lot of cooks in the kitchen,
Yeah.
eh?
Right. So you gotta. If you try to do all this by yourself, it's going to be a nightmare, and most guaranteed it's going to go wrong somewhere.
What are some of the craziest like horror stories that you've heard of when it came to people attempting this by themselves, whether they decided to work with you after or you just heard about the issue? I mean, what are some of the things that actually, not just what could happen, but what have you seen actually happen?
So, like I said, we had this lady trying to buy property in Isla Mujeres, and she thought she actually bought it. She gave out a lot of money because she had a contract. And then after a while that she wasn't able to get the property, or she found out, someone claiming that no, that was their property, then she comes to us because we hadn't been in this thing. Like, unfortunately, people sometimes contact you when it's too late and when the problem is already there, right? So she contacts us and she's like, you know what? I don't know what's going on. And we're like, how did you buy this property? And that's the kind of thing I'm telling you. Like, she just bought it from someone who said owned the property. And we go into looking into all the registry and everything, and it turns out the property was not even theirs. So now we get into a huge judicial fight, which you don't want to get into the Mexican legal system.
It's a lot harder to win lawsuits here, isn't it?
Yeah,
like the legal system is not
really hard.
structured
It's
in the
not
way
very structured,
in the U.S.,
and
right?
Once you have to go that avenue, it's not good. That can take a lot of years.
And Fulanito's already long gone to another state or
exactly. And I think finally we had to bring a lot of people in for that, like not just us, but another accountants and a lot of specialists, to kind of put this together.
Sounds like it gets a lot more expensive when they don't call you
from the beginning.
When they don't work with you in the beginning and have, okay.
Exactly.
Why do you think that is? Like, why do people do that and try to figure it out all on their own? Because if you guys are watching this, I mean, our audience is very intelligent and they like to make the right decisions and be very calculated and they're very analytical, as am I, where I want to have all of the right information and do things the right way. So if you're watching this and you've gotten this far in the video, chances are you're definitely like, oh, I want to do things right. I want to get the right kind of support and guidance. But let's say that, for people not on our channel,
right?
for the average, person, maybe
person
that might not be watching this, even like what is it that makes them not seek out the help of a professional, an immigration or an attorney or a facilitator to help with all these different issues with real estate? Like, why do they try to avoid
do it by
that?
themselves? I think it's for maybe 2 or 3 different reasons. The first one is ignorance. It's not that they're ignorant people, but it's that they're ignorant of the Mexican system. So they try to think, I mean, if I'm thinking like an American or a Canadian, I think, okay, this can go smoothly. And, I believe what you're telling me is true. And we can do this transaction and we can just sign and that's it. So
they think that they have recourse.
Exactly. Yeah. And that they have legal recourse or other recourse, like, oh, if not, maybe I can get my money back, but maybe we can cancel the transaction. So that's one thing, like ignorance or maybe being too naive that everything is going to go out as planned, But Mexico is an entirely different system. It works very differently than other countries. So that's the first thing, like if you're not, even if you're familiar, like even people buying property in Mexico should look for assistance of, a real estate agent, an attorney, a notary, and everything. So more, like people that are not familiar with the Mexican system, well, I mean, that's like a double reason to search for help, right? But I think that's one reason. Another reason is I think they believe they're going to save some money by not hiring anyone and doing it themselves, like it's sometimes very easy to think, oh, well, this seems simple enough. I can do it
Yeah.
myself, you know?
But it's kind of like going to Vegas and just putting it all on black.
Exactly. And saying,
Right.
well, you know,
I mean, because there are some
maybe,
instances in which everything goes fine.
right.
But
And
what would you say the percentages of that versus
I
things
think
going
the
wrong if they don't
percentage
have the right?
like that, everything goes fine when you're not seeking any assistance in Mexico when buying property, it's like maybe not even 20%, you know, chance that things will go right.
I'd rather take my odds in Vegas. At least those
Yeah,
are closer to 50. Even
exactly.
if the house, I mean, if you're on,
Yeah,
you're throwing it on red or throwing it on black.
right.
At least then the house
At
has a
some
little
point,
margin, but you're
at
in
some
the
point you're
double
gonna
digits. But
win.
that's not a good. Those aren't good odds.
Here, no.
20%
Here,
on a
it's
huge transaction.
exactly it, and it's not necessarily because you're gonna get scammed. It might not be a scam. It might be a legit transaction, but at some point of the process, you're gonna get stuck, and you're not gonna be able to move forward. And
And somebody
so,
else who does have legal representation, if it was a legitimate deal, they're going to end up moving things forward, and you're going to lose the opportunity. That's
exactly,
best case scenario.
yeah, best case
Worst
scenario.
case scenario is you're out $250,000 or more.
Exactly. And if you have help from the start, like legal help, financial help, even tax, you know, we also work with a financial specialist to see your tax scheme because now you're going to be in, you know, investing in another country. So
And that's something people don't think about either.
how
The
are you
tax
going to do your
implications.
taxes and stuff? So that's something that we also bring into the mix, like bringing a financial specialist to work, even with the whole thing of, okay, how much does Mexico tax me for buying property in Mexico? They don't even know that. And then, you know, they're like, oh, I thought I was paying whatever, maybe $800,000 for this property. And it turns out it's $1,000,000. Why is that? Well, because you got taxed, you got notary fees, you got all this. And you're going to get hit with all that at the end if you don't have a strategy.
Yep.
Because taxes can be lowered if you work them from the beginning.
So it sounds like, even if they were to drop $10, $15, $20,000 up front, it potentially could save them 5 or 10
it's going to
times
save them a
as
lot
much
of
of that
money.
because they're doing the tax strategy. They're doing, and it might even be lower depending on what they need, but they get tax strategy for when they buy, tax strategy for when they sell. You also get legal guidance like throughout the entire process. And this is what a lot of our consultations, we talk about these things, whether it's getting your residency visa through income, through savings, through buying a property, getting that legal assistance that you need to actually facilitate those transactions. For anything like that you're interested in doing, we do offer a free consultation if you qualify. You can just go to entrepreneurexpat.com/consult, and we'll put the link below this video, and you can apply for that. Talk to myself, our team. Monica's part of our team here, and she and her internal team support us with a lot of these things for our own projects as well as a lot of our different clients. What else have you been seeing in terms of scams? Anything else you can think of that's really prevalent?
Yes, there's another type of scams, or they're not scams all the time, but something I kind of tell clients to either avoid or be very cautious with is buying on pre-sale. Buying on pre-sale means there's not a development yet, there's nothing built, and they're just showing you this is what we're going to build, but we need you to pay up front. So
basically financing their construction with your money.
that's what they're doing. Like they're getting a lot of people like you involved, and then they get all money from everyone, and then that's how they start building. Sometimes they don't even have permits to build. Sometimes they don't even have permits to become like condominium or whatever type of residential or commercial or whatever you're going to be advertising and selling. So they just sell this outright. They do own the land. Sometimes different companies, like a company will own the land and another company is going to develop. So developers in Mexico, I mean, some of them are trustworthy. A lot of them are not. So the first thing is, if you want to buy, I always recommend against this, but if you want to buy in this type of scenario, I recommend that once again, you hire someone, a legal expert that can take you through this process. And so that what we do is we kind of do a research and a due diligence on, okay, who the developer is. Is he a well-known developer in Mexico or not? Have they built anything else? If so, what have they built? Did they comply with everything in that first thing they did? Sometimes they have different stages, like stage 1 is built. They're building stage 2. Okay, at least they complied with that. sometimes it's like nobody knows these people, who are they? Because you can also get to cases where they're just laundering money or doing, using your money for other purposes, and they're never going to develop. Now, the best case scenario is that they do develop, but since they're financing from the people that are paying, and if they don't get enough buyers, then you're going to be stuck until they get more money.
Yeah.
So they
It's
promise
almost like a pyramid scheme.
Exactly. So they promise to get everything done, and you have your unit or whatever, your house or your apartment ready within 2 years, and it can take them 5 years. It's very difficult once you get into this to go against them. I mean, we've had cases where they don't comply. You can't go to court because, like you just said, the legal system here does not work that well. And these people or these companies have a lot of power. And so, the court is not really going to be in your favor in these cases.
You don't have the same you don't really have the same kinds of consumer protections in Mexico that you do in the US.
Not really. I mean, for this type of cases, it's very difficult to get consumer protection. Like I said, for timeshare, sometimes you can get consumer protection. These cases, no. You gotta litigate them once you run into this problem. And this is just a very general way of putting it. There's a lot of nuances that go into buying and pre-sale.
And if someone is really hell bent on buying something pre-sale, could you break it into a couple different parts of the timeline in terms of risk? Like, hey, they don't have the property yet, and it's just an idea, and they're selling it. Versus, okay, they've got the property, but they don't have permits. Versus, they actually have permits. Like, how would you break that in terms of what your likelihood of getting an on-time delivery?
Well, an on-time delivery is very unlikely, even if everything goes perfect, because even if everything goes as planned, they're always relying, on the workers, on the builders and everything. So they might not show up for work, they might whatever, and that is going to delay the process.
It's the mañana.
It's the mañana
attitude that we have here a lot in
So
Mexico.
when you're buying like that, just take into consideration that even if everything goes perfect, it's going to delay 6 months to a year probably. If everything goes perfect. But the things that can go wrong is, first, like you said, they don't have the money, first of all, okay? So that's one thing. And they need to get more money, more resources. If they don't have a line of credit with a bank, or if they don't have some kind of insurance and assurance from a bank, then you got to ask yourself why. Why don't they have this? Like, why is the bank not giving them credit, Because they're not reliable. They don't have anything to base their credit on, or what the issue is. So that's, I think, another red flag if they can't get credit from the bank. Because if they would get credit, they don't have to use their money. They can use that line of credit.
Exactly.
The other thing is, if you're trying to buy, you will only know once you've hired someone that's going to do the due diligence. If like I was saying, if they're reliable, if they're in the Mexican market, if they're known, if they have built something else. But also, you got to get into this due diligence of saying, okay, do they have proper title? Do they have all the permits? That you got to go into all the registries that we have in Mexico that we know where to look for. But of course, the layperson is not going to know where to look.
No.
And they don't even have access to it because it's not open to the public. Like, you can't get public access to some of the files. So do they have all the permits? Are they going to have all the permits, or are they going to be, are you going to hit a block where it's like, no, we're going to suspend construction, or the authority is going to suspend construction because you didn't get this and this and that. So building and permits is like, the first thing is money, right? Do they have money? Second thing is with the banks. How is the relation of this developer with the banks? And I would say money and reputation first, because like we said, they have to have a good reputation. And then all the permits, that's like another stage. Once they're building, okay, they have the permits, but they can still break up the contract and not deliver everything they're saying in the contract. They might deliver some things. For example, they'll give you your unit, but there's not a pool. They said they'd have a pool, they have a restaurant, and they don't have any of that. Now you have to take your unit as is. So now that's
hope.
Yeah, with a hope that they're going to build it someday. Yeah. And so that's another aspect of it. Contract reviewing, contract compromises before you sign the contract, because once you sign, it's too late.
Yep.
So all that type of thing is important, I think, with when you're buying pre-sale.
And every one of those things kind of increases, every one of those items that they have kind of increases the likelihood that you're going to get it. But to your point, that's the danger of pre-sale. You may get a slightly or much better price, but you're running the risk of you never getting the unit at all, or getting it super, super late, or not even having the amenities that
you were
they
promised. Or the finishes, or the quality of materials and stuff like that.
Yeah, like this condo we're at right here. I mean, we're renting. It's a pretty nice condo, but there's a lot of issues. Like the conduits for wire are not the size they're supposed to be. You can't pass cable through them. There's issues with like the membrane on the roof because they're all just built quickly and in a lot of cases very, very cheaply.
Right, exactly.
So you never really know. And that's why sometimes it's almost even better to buy your own land and build and supervise, but you still need legal support for that.
Exactly. And then and also, once once they've built a little bit and everything, you also need appraisals and that kind of stuff, to avoid those kind of issues. Now, water, electricity, everything else, everything like that is or can be a potential problem at some point, because if they don't sell all their units, how are they going to divide those bills? Who's going to pay for them? Who's going to pay for the vacant units? So now you got this, and then the last part of it is all the regulation issues as far as what I was saying, what type of, if this is going to be a condominium or what regime we're going to have this on, the bylaws and everything. So that's another legal aspect where you have to get into it.
That's a lot to consider, and that's not anything that I would want to have in my head to try to figure it all out on my own.
Right.
So I encourage anybody watching who is considering investing in Mexico, buying real estate, buying land, whatever it is, go to that link below the video. Go to entrepreneurexpat.com/consult. Schedule a consult. You may be in touch soon with Monica or her team or one of our other team members, depending on what your specific needs are. Thank you again, Monica, for being here with us today and sharing all of your wisdom with our channel. There's just so many golden nuggets in that, and I hope that it makes people think twice about trying to do this entire process on their own. As always, like this video. It helps us out a lot, and definitely hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video very soon.